Hi guys, Mrs. Ray Nearson here, back to read some more of the war that I finally won. Let's get started. We are on chapter 929 today. Let's go. I'm sure she's fine, Lady Thornton said. Even the Nazis wouldn't harm an elderly woman. Remember, it's Ruth's grandmother. We haven't heard from her, Ruth said. Not one letter in almost 2 years. My mother is sick from worry. Lady Thornton said, I'm sure she's all right. Ruth's eyes glittered. You don't really understand anything, do you? That or you choose not to. She stood. Excuse me, I will take my work upstairs. I watched her go. Across the room, Jamie made airplane noises. Jonathan raised his eyebrows at his mother. How can she say that? Lady Thornton demanded. When you, my son, my only son, are risking your life every single day. When your government's taken my home, when the government's taken my home, when our village has been bombed, when we deal with queues and shortages every day. Jonathan pressed his fingertips together so hard that the pads of his fingers turned white. Because we haven't faced anything like that she has. Anything like what she has, he said. You've lent our house. You haven't lost it. None of us know how she feels. Jamie looked up. Can you rescue Ruth's grandmother? He asked Jonathan. Can you go get her with your plane? Not with a Spitfire, Jonathan said. I'm afraid we'll need infantry for that. Will you do it? Jamie asked. Jonathan said, We'll certainly try. Susan was not cross about the eggs. She wasn't even cross about the butter. Of course she had to celebrate, she said. She threw her arms around Jonathan as though she was thrilled to see him, as though he was someone really important to her. Maybe he was. I thought perhaps a cake, Lady Thornton suggested. Yes, we could manage a small one, Susan said. Jamie, quit pestering Jonathan. Run over to Fred's or to the Ellistons and see if you can borrow one more egg. Tell them I'll pay you back. And invite them all to tea. Tell them we have a banana. Can you imagine? Like, they're all so excited about this one banana that they're all going to share it. I eat a banana almost every day. The thick skin of the banana peeled away. Inside was a long, slim, cream-colored fruit. It was soft like pudding and didn't have seeds or stones. You could cut it the way that you would a block of warm butter. Susan divided Jonathan's banana into slices and handed them around on a plate. Jamie's eyes widened when he tasted his. I like banana, he said. I wasn't sure. Susan laughed when she saw my face. Ada's thinking, this is very different, she said, and she was right. I was. What's flying like? Jamie asked Jonathan. He scooted his chair over until he was nearly touching Jonathan's side. He was wearing Jonathan's scarf. Jonathan had shown him how to tie a knot the way a pilot would. Extraordinary, Jonathan said. Free. You can go up, down, sideways, any direction at all. Everything's beautiful from above. The ocean is like an endless sparkling blanket of blue. I turned toward him. That's how it looks from the church steeple. Jonathan nodded. I said, when you're flying, are you afraid? Maybe it wasn't a question I should ask, because Jonathan's face went very still. I'm not afraid because I'm flying, he said at last. Let's just leave it at that. Jamie leaned into him. Everyone's shooting at you, he said. Yes, Jonathan said. We're all shooting at each other. After our baths, we came downstairs to listen to the radio news. Jonathan was slumped half asleep in his mother's wing chair. He started when he saw me. Ah! He said, Ada, I promised to take you riding. Me and Maggie both, I said, and she's not here. Still, he said, I did promise, and I don't like to waste the chance. Maybe really early tomorrow morning. I've only got to catch the train before 9. With wartime daylight savings, it didn't even start to get light until 7. I said, we'll do it next time. Maybe Maggie will be home. He looked relieved. You aren't disappointed? I was disappointed not to have the ride, but happy he remembered his promise. Plus, he looked so tired. I said, I'm fine. Next morning it rained. Penelope and Persnickety laid 2 more eggs, and Susan fried them in the still buttery omelet pan for Jonathan's breakfast. All of the rest of us ate toast with tiny scrapings of jam. Jonathan seemed even more tired than he had the day before. I thought of what it meant to be a pilot, to go out and try to kill the Germans, to kill people like Ruth. Except that Ruth had been kicked out of Germany. Hitler had kicked her out. If our pilots hadn't won the Battle of Britain, Hitler and the German army would have invaded England for sure. That's what everyone said, even Winston Churchill. I was pretty sure Churchill wouldn't lie. War was as complicated as religion when you started to think about it. Jonathan shook my hand goodbye. Next time, he said, we'll have our ride. I won't forget. I nodded. Be careful, I said. He grinned ruefully. I can't afford that. Remember, there's a war going on. Chapter 30. The war-watching rota had us each going up once every 2 or 3 weeks, too often to forget how frightening it was, but not often enough to get used to it. The next time I was scheduled after Jonathan's visit, I got the midnight shift, midnight to 2 a.m., and the WVS woman paired with me was Susan. I preferred Susan to Lady Thornton, or to someone I didn't know, of course, but at the same time, I dreaded going with her. Susan woke me after a few hours' sleep. We bundled up and walked to the village through the deep darkness and air so cold it was like breathing knives. Ooh, I can feel that. Like super cold weather, it's like hard to breathe, like hurts your throat. Nothing's going to happen tonight, said one of the men we replaced. It's a new moon, too dark to fly. Nothing except standing exposed in the middle of the sky. The climb to the steeple was the worst yet. Inside the staircase, I couldn't see anything, not even Susan right in front of me. The cold air made my insides shiver, and that felt like fear. It was hard to breathe. It was hard to make myself stay present inside my head. By the time we reached the outdoors again, I felt numb inside and out. I clutched the stone wall and stared down at my feet, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Beside me, Susan tilted her face to the sky. Oh, she said. I looked up. I gasped too. Thousands of stars had pricked the sky. More than that, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, thousands of thousands. More stars than I'd ever seen, so many that they made a broad streak of light across the middle of the sky. I stared and stared. I'd seen stars lots of times since living with Susan. They'd never before looked like this. It's such a clear night, Susan said. No clouds, no moon, and of course the blackout. My face felt warmer under the starlight, even as my breath blew out in a frozen cloud. I wish I had paper, I said. I'd draw a map of the stars. People have done that, Susan replied. They're named patterns in the sky. Constellations. Look for the brightest stars. See that one? And there. And there. And those. How they make a square and then a crooked line? That's the plow. I looked, but I couldn't see what she meant. There were too many stars to concentrate on only a few. What's a plow? Susan looked down at me. She smiled. A tool for tilling the earth. Then she showed me the other shapes. An archer, twin brothers, and Draco the dragon, she said. A dragon on the edge of the map of the sky. A real dragon or a story dragon? I asked. Susan put her arm around me. She said, all of the dragons are story dragons. I forgot to be afraid until I stumbled on a rough piece of slate and fell against the parapet wall. Then fear came rushing back so quickly I nearly vomited. Susan pulled me back from the wall. You're shaking, she said. I couldn't stop. What about this frightens you so much? She asked. I don't know. I looked up again. Susan wasn't afraid. The stars are fantastic. I never saw stars looking out the window of Mam's flat. You couldn't look up out of Mam's window. Not really, or at least I never did. You don't have to do this, Susan said quietly. We can find you other useful war work. This is why I dreaded going with her. I shook my head. It felt like a bargain I'd made. My fear in exchange for Jamie's safety. For mine and Jamie's and Susan's safety. Are you sure? Susan asked. Don't stop me. I won't, she said, because I don't believe you're in danger up here, not any more than anywhere else. Think about it. You don't have to feel safe to actually be safe. I supposed. I never felt safe, so how would I know? A few days later, mid-afternoon, I banged on Ruth's door. I'm busy, she yelled. She'd become even more of a hermit since telling us about her grandmother. Then she stuck her head out of her door. Did I get a letter? She asked. No, I said. She went to shut the door again, but I stuck my foot in the door. Tell me about your grandmother, I said. Her eyes narrowed. Why? I want to know about grandmothers, I said. They sound nice, and I don't have one. You did. Not to know them. Ruth sighed. She opened the door a tiny bit farther. I pushed myself forward. It's cold in your room, I said. This entire country is cold. She sat down at her desk and picked up a pencil. I'm working. Do you have any pictures of your grandmother or any of your family? None of your business, Ruth said. I said, I'm not your enemy. She looked at me silently. I said, I'm not. She said, but I'm a German. I'm your enemy, remember? I said, you hate Hitler more than I do. Ruth nodded. Very true, but I still won't tell you about my grandmother. I waited. After a pause, she spoke again, looking down at her desk. If I start letting things out of my heart, she said, if I talk to you, if I bring out the photographs, I will fall to pieces. I won't be able to endure living here. I won't be able to learn what I need to learn to help my family. If I crack at all, I will come undone. She kept her voice absolutely quiet and even. I said, I know how that feels. I thought you did, she said. Now go away. I feel bad for her. Can you imagine being in this place all alone and feeling like that? Ugh, like talking about it like you would think it would make her feel better, but obviously not. One more chapter for today. Chapter 31. That was the last cold snap. Spring arrived with bits of green, and an enormous white pig came to live in the pen in our backyard. Susan and Lady Thornton named her Mrs. Rochester. In a few months, she was going to Faro, which meant having babies, and the babies were going to be pig club pigs. That is. Pig clubs were a war thing. Groups of people combined their food scraps and fed them to the baby pig. When the pig was grown and slaughtered, the whole group shared its meat. Pig clubs turned leftovers no one would eat into pork chops and bacon. You could almost never find pork chops in the shops anymore. Every day, Mrs. Elliston, the wife of the man who farmed the Thornton estate, collected her potato peels and gristle and other leftovers in a bucket. Fred added his, and I carried the bucket home from the stables. Susan added our scraps and boiled the stinking mess into slop for Mrs. Rochester. It was a lot of work. Jamie loved Mrs. Rochester. He fed her and gave her water, scrapped up her manure, spread fresh straw for bedding, scratched her back with a stick, and sang to her, for all I knew. I avoided her as much as possible. Ruth, on the other hand, liked her. She's a very friendly pig, Ruth said. Ruth moved a small table and one of the old kitchen chairs out to the back garden. She studied there, in a patch of sunshine beside the pig pen, with Bovril on her lap and the chickens pecking the grass near her feet. Did you have pigs in Germany? I asked her. Of course not. Jews don't eat pork. I meant for a pet, I said, not to eat them. She looked up. No one keeps pigs for a pet. We had horses and a dog, that's all. How many horses? 3. One each for my father, my mother, and me. She scratched behind Bovril's ears. The cat kneaded his claws into her leg. She didn't mind. When I was very small, we had a gray pony named Schicknickflock. Probably not saying that right. Snowflake. When I outgrew him, we gave him to my younger cousins. What are cousins? I reached for Penelope. She scuttled away. My mother's brother's children, Ruth said. If you have a child one day and Jamie has a child, they will be cousins. It was irritating that Ruth knew English words I didn't. I said so. I started learning English in school, she replied. The rest I learned fast at the internment camp. I worked hard. I knew I needed to be fluent to go to university. Why do you care about university? I want to be like my father, Ruth said. My father had worked on the docks. All the fathers I grew up with did. Where are your cousins now? You're asking a lot of questions, Ruth said. I didn't respond. She sighed. They're still in Germany, she said. My mother's father and brother were both cavalrymen in the German army. My uncle fought for Germany in the First World War, so he feels safe in Germany even though he's Jewish. He thinks other Germans will respect his service to the country. He's fighting against us? He's not fighting anyone, Ruth said. He's too old to fight now. But he fought against us before? Yes, Ruth said. He's a good German. You can't blame him for that. Of course I could. Germans were the enemy. Every time I was about to forget that, Ruth reminded me. Ruth shook her head. I know it's very difficult to get mail from Germany right now. Still nothing from your grandmother? Nothing from any of them. Maggie came home for the 2 weeks surrounding Easter. Her first night back, we stayed awake late in our bedroom. I'm worried about Jonathan, I'm worried about Mom, and I'm lonely and I want to be home. You're here. It isn't fair. She whispered to me across the space between our beds. We'd left the blackout down and the moonlight streamed through the window. I really hate school. I didn't used to, but I do now. I told Maggie about Ruth's grandmother. I said, Jamie and I must have a grandmother too. Well, of course, said Maggie, 2 of them. I shivered. Perhaps my grandmothers had been as nasty as my mother. Perhaps it was lucky I couldn't remember them. It's too bad you don't have anything from your home in London, Maggie said. Your mother must have left some things behind. Maggie had loved me, but she would never understand what my life in London had been like. Only Stephen White and Jamie had known. I didn't hear from Stephen, and I hoped Jamie had forgotten. My family didn't have anything extra, I said. Photographs or books or anything like that. I stuck my right foot out of the bed covers. I have the scar. That's how I remember my mother. Susan gave you that scar, not your mother. It's a good scar. I suppose. You've got other scars too, don't you? Maggie rolled onto her back. I could see her hands clasp the edge of the bed sheets. Everyone does. Invisible ones. I took a deep breath. In, out. I thought about being up in the steeple where it hurt to breathe. I could not really imagine Maggie having scars. She kept talking. So you understand what it's like at school. Everyone afraid and all the news of people dying. That wretched telegraph boy bicycling up the drive. Ruth was even quieter around Maggie than she was around me. Does she ever talk? Maggie asked. I shrugged. Sometimes. Not really. Jamie said, she talks to me when you two go ride. Susan said the Friday before Easter was called Good Friday. It was a special day to remember Jesus dying on the cross. But this year, she said, that morning, it also happens to be a special day for Ruth. It's the first day of a Jewish holiday called Passover. Before dinner, Susan poured salt water into several small bowls. She had Maggie set one next to each of our plates. She handed me several sprigs of parsley. Put one beside each bowl, she said. Where'd you get the parsley? We started planting our garden, but the only things sprouting so far were radishes and lettuce. Mrs. Elliston had some wintering over in her cold frame, Susan said. She opened a bottle of Lady Thornton's wine, something she rarely did, and poured a small amount into a glass set by each place. It's not very much, but at least Ruth will know we're thinking of her. When Ruth saw the table with the wine and the parsley, her hands flew over her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. Oh, thank you, she said. I don't know how to do a real cedar, said Susan. Ruth said, but you knew it was Passover. As we sat down, Ruth said that on the first night of Passover, her whole family would get together for a special meal called a seder. Wine, parsley, and salt water were part of the seder meal. I went to a seder once at university, said Susan. Would you like to ask the 4 questions? Ruth looked at Jamie. Usually the youngest person asked them. What are the 4 questions? Jamie asked. Ruth took a deep breath. She said, the first is, why is this night different from all the others? Jamie put down his fork. He settled his hands into his lap. He repeated, why is this night different from all the others? Ruth sat very still. After a pause, she said, we dip parsley in salt water because we replace our tears with gratitude. She picked up her parsley, dipped it into the bowl, and ate it. So did Susan and Jamie, Maggie, and after a pause, Lady Thornton and me. Salty bitterness filled my mouth. It tasted like tears. Man, that's so nice of them to do that tradition for her. We're going to stop right there. We will pick back up next time with chapter 32. Bye, guys.